the concept we'll be going over is trend lines. Let's take a look at my screen and I'll show you how trend lines work. So here we can see that we have an uptrend. Price starts here and make a higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, and so forth. For an uptrend, you will always draw what is called a trend line on the higher lows. You want as many touch points as possible. And I'll show you what I mean. So if you come over here to your tools, you grab array. You always want to start at the lowest point and drag it up to the most recent higher low. And this is what's called a trend line. Now these trend lines hold in place because traders know that they have an estimate range for how far a bullish market is going to pull back. So here we see buyers push price high and we get a pullback. We get to this point and price shoots even higher. We get another pullback. Buyers know that, hey, this is a place where the market is trending and this is a good estimate of a zone where buyers will get back in to push price higher. And that's exactly what happens. Price gets pushed higher, comes back down. We'll know again, hey, we're following our line, this trend line. There's a bunch of other buyers following this trend line, and price pushes even higher. The more touch points on a trend line, the more valid that trend line is. And you know that there's other buyers in the market that are respecting and using this trend line. Now let's take a look at how to use a trend line on a downtrend on my screen. So here we see that we had an uptrend. The uptrend broke through this trend line. That's another indicator or confluence that you can use that the price is switching from an uptrend to a downtrend. And we also got our change of character here. And we continue to a downtrend, creating lower lows and higher lows, or excuse me, lower highs. Lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high. For drawing a trend line on your downtrends, you want to first grab your array. You want to start at the top, and your trend line will always be above the downtrend. And you'll always be connecting your lower highs. Those will be your points of interest for connecting your trend line. So here, put it there. And you see that the downtrend is coming up. It's touching right here at these points, these lower highs, and sellers are realizing that. And every time that price comes up to this area or this line, price continues to shoot down with the downtrend. Now remember, for trend lines, you want at least 2 points or 2 touches on your trend line for it to be considered a valid trend line. The more touches you have on your trend line, the more respected that trend line is among the traders in the market. Now let's take a look at an example of bullish and bearish trend lines and how they're drawn on a candlestick chart. Now here we are on a candlestick chart. We can see that we have a downtrend and it switches to an uptrend. So I'll show you how I would draw my trend lines on this chart. First, I will grab my tool, my array. I'll start here at the top and move it down here. And like I said, your trend lines don't have to be perfect. They're just a rough estimate of where you think that the trend is or where price will go. So here we have 1 touch, 2 touch, 3 touch before price really sells off and sellers take control here and are able to push price far away from your trend line. Now, if I see that price is far away from my trend line, most of the time I will actually draw another trend line and steepen it up to more accurately get the trend. So we'll do that now. You just go from the last point that was touched on your previous trend line and draw your second trend line to steepen it up. And you can see here we have 1 touch point, 2 touch point, 3 touch points before price gets here and the trend line is officially broken. This is how I would draw my trend lines for a bearish market. So now I'll show you how to draw a trend line on a market that is going up or is bullish. So we'll grab our array tool. Always start from the bottom. Like I said, your trend line doesn't have to be perfectly on these touch points. You just want it in the area. So here we can see we got 1 touch, 2 touch, 3 touch, 4 touches. So this trend line is pretty respected by the buyers in this market. And then eventually our trend line fails and sellers are able to push through. And that is the end of this trend line. So this is how I would draw my trend lines on a bearish and bullish market. Remember, the more touch points on your trend line, the more valid and respected it is in the market by those traders. Now remember, these trend lines may not always work to an exact T as you expect because they are drawn to the discretion of the trader. But again, you can use these as a baseline and a foundation to create and find your strategy so you can have success in these markets.